Justice Moyer, back in the late 90s, he was the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court for many years. He had an idea that the courts could benefit greatly from mediation. And Ohio, along with Florida and California, were sort of at the forefront of the idea of court-connected mediation. And in his wisdom, he decided the court was sort of flush with money back then, which is not the case these days, but he decided that the way that he would try to implement that so that all 88 counties could participate in it was to offer it for a couple of years. To 1 year he would pick general division civil.
I see.
One year he would pick domestic relations. One year he would pick juvenile, or muni. And each year they would take applications or sort of a grant application that would have to be written, and a request was made, and the court would review that, and then depending on how many they wanted to bring on that year, 5, 10, somewhere in that number, they would bring those specific courts online with them. They would fund them for a couple of years, let the counties, the bar associations, the judges, the attorneys in that area kind of get a feel for the program.
Sure.
Because alternative dispute resolution, which we fall under that umbrella, used to consist of arbitration.
Right.
And for a long time, while that was a good way to do it, it sort of fell out of favor in that it wasn't dispositive of the case, in the sense that if you didn't like the result, you're right back on the court's docket.
Right.
His idea, the better idea in the way it turned out, was that if you can bring people together and resolve it, you won't have that
Sure.
backlog. So he would fund each year, the Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court would fund it. After that, it was up to the counties to decide whether or not they wanted to develop the funding for the program and continue it. Back in early 2000, because of our small court compared to the giants around us, Summit
sure.
County,
Yeah,
Lorraine
Summit,
County,
yeah, right.
Cuyahoga County, Judge Collier and Judge Kimbler joined forces with the Wayne County Common Pleas Court judges, and then Judge Brown and Judge Wiest.
Right.
Excuse me. And they made a joint application so that they could get a program for both courts, since they were sort of smaller courts.
Sure.
So for 2 years we did both courts, and they were sort of equal partners, even though the Medina County Common Pleas Court has quite a few more cases that are filed. So we'd go back and forth. And
Did you actually, I mean, were you involved at that point in time? Or?
Yes, when I interviewed and was offered the position, it was to come in because the grant was starting up. At that point, Medina was just doing a settlement week, and I think they had just started it maybe the year before that.
Did you physically travel between the two counties?
I did.
So you went to Wayne County to hear cases, hear cases there, and I see.
Right.
Well, what eventually happened? Does Wayne have their own now, or?
Well, after the 2 years were up, Medina had already, I think about a year into it, decided that the program was what they were looking for.
Okay.
And they took the step to start to put some money away for it by adding onto the filing fee.
I see.
And at the end of the 2 years, Medina was going to adopt the program, go forward. Wayne didn't seem like they were too sure, and then at the end they decided that while they didn't want to be a full partner, they decided they'd like to be more of a customer.
Oh.
So every year the county commissioners would sign a little agreement. They would essentially buy a week out of the month, and they would, I think quarterly or something like that, they would send some funds up north. It's
still our arrangement today? I mean.
Well, no, that went on for, I think, we were down there 7 years. Eventually they decided they wanted to take the mediation function, combine it with a magistrate and a court administrator, kind of a three-headed monster.
I see.
That was their intention. They offered the position to someone, and then there was a delay in setting it up, and eventually they never brought it online.
But we're still doing fine with it, and that's...
Right about that time is when the foreclosure crisis really hit pretty hard. So It was good in a way in the sense that it freed up time that I was spending down there to allow us to...
Foreclosure, as I mentioned earlier, Bruce, we've had 2 shows on it. And actually, we had our clerk of courts was on to talk about it once, Kathy Fortney, Judge Kimbler, and I had Steve Bailey, a local attorney, on.
Oh, sure.
And Judge Kimbler tells me this takes a significant part of his docket, like almost a third of it. So I'm sure if you're into that now, I'm sure that it is taking up any time you would have been using to travel to Wayne County now. And hopefully that'll get better, but it's still going to be with us for a while.
Sure seems that way.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So I guess we'd credit Chief Justice Moyer for his vision there to get this thing going, and it's still with us today. And you're funded. Your program is funded just by way of us making filing fees. So.
Yeah, one of the things that was part of Judge Moyer's vision, they didn't want to make it so that the litigants had to pay for it. They thought that if they could make it so that the program was available to anybody, that was the preference.
Makes sense.
So the judges and the commissioners decided that this is the way we're going to fund it, rather than making it part of the county budget. The court could handle it.
Well, I guess
everybody pays a little bit.
The Chief Justice had the wisdom to get it going, but I mean, what the folks did down in Wayne, if that works for them, that's great. I mean, it's still the concept is there. Are these programs pretty well spread across the state of Ohio now? I mean, it's been 20 years since he, I think, went forward with this, as I remember.
Yeah, he got it started in the late 90s.
Was it the late 90s? Okay.
Yeah, and
well, I guess
I think that they had it in a lot of the counties, and the smaller the county, the more difficult it was to get going. And what they did was combine more counties.
Okay.
And so they would have one mediator up in the northwest or down in the southeast, and rather than have one county with maybe 200 filings try to support a program, it would have to be a very part-time program.
Sure.
But if you take 3 or 4 of those counties and they each kick in a little bit and just have the mediator move around.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Bruce, to be a mediator or like yourself, I mean, are there specific, I know you're a licensed attorney, but what are the qualifications to be a mediator?
Well, in Ohio, there really are none, with the exception of domestic relations mediation. To do that, you have to have a 40-hour course, and I think that's the only...
Just a 40-hour course?
Yeah.
So actually, you wouldn't necessarily have to be an attorney to be a mediator?
Not only would you not have to be, but even in the court-connected programs, especially further out in the less populated counties, there are a number of courts and counties that use mediators that are not attorneys. They're social workers or
I see.
something like that. But they've had a lot of training in the sense that when Chief Justice Moyer instituted the program, they held a lot of trainings, and they would bring people in, and we would all go to Columbus, or they would go around the state, and they really made it so that everybody got a good dose.
This has turned out to be a pretty happy ending story from his concept to, God bless him, what he has left us.
That's right.
I guess I'm going to jump around here just a little bit in the interest of time, but I know you can't force a settlement. I mean, I know that firsthand, and I'm sure our viewers are understanding that. You're a facilitator. You're trying to bring people together, but they don't always settle. I mean, there's sometimes you can't, I'm sure as hard as you try. What happens to the dispute when, car accident, plaintiff says, I'm not going to settle for less than $25,000. Defendant's insurance company says, no, I don't think so. It says, 10,000 is a little more in order.
Right.
And all the discussion in the world as to, well, this is what these go for, and this is how bad I get hurt, and I'm sure you've heard all of that plenty of times.
On a weekly basis.
But at the end of the day, what happens to that case? I mean, we got at least 3 hours with you.
Right.
Do they come back again for another shot, or?
Well, it depends on the situation. Sometimes we'll get to that point, and you're really asking both sides, especially the plaintiffs, to maybe swallow a lot or
Sure.
look at a lot of information that maybe they haven't asked themselves that question before. How's the jury going to view this? What was the impact really like? Was all this treatment really necessary? Things that are going to really create value or maybe
Sure.
not. And some people can take that information and process it, and others focus on, I talked to Joe down at the barber shop and his brother-in-law's sister,
right.
that story. So sometimes if the attorneys want, we will schedule a second session. They can come back after they've thought about it. Other times we just send it back to the court for further proceedings, which means that the trial schedule
Going to trial.
will continue. But time after time, I'll have people come back in, and I'm talking about the attorneys or the insurance adjusters, and just what you said,
Yeah.
remember that case?
Yeah, it's been 3 months ago.
Yeah, what you said was true about planting seeds, because that's exactly what happened. You get people together and they're focused on, what they want. They're focused
Sure,
on,
sure.
I've been hurt, I want this, and they haven't really considered all the aspects of it, how much time it's going to cost, what
It serves of any
cost to
purpose
bring
at all.
it.
It's a learning experience for everybody. But I guess the long and short of it, you do the very best you can, and if it happened in the 3 hours, fine. If it happened 3 months, like my case, that's fine too. But if you can't, for the benefit of our viewers and everybody else, you're just going back to court. I mean,
That's right.
You're heading towards trial, and then ultimately a jury or a judge is going to decide this, and it's going to be done unless you want to go to the Court of Appeals.
Exactly.
Now, I'm going to ask you one last question. We're starting to run out of time here. I'd love to talk to you more about this. But there's a lot of discussion goes on in mediation. I mean, discussion terms that, or words that lawyers would pick up on and use to their advantage of their client. Is any of this information and exchange permitted to wind up back in a courtroom?
No, it's not, and that's a real concern for some people. They're afraid that if they speak their mind, they're going to give something up that is going to come back to haunt them.
Sure.
And so when we have that initial meeting and the parties and their attorneys get together in one room, we try to make it clear to them that what we say here
Stays here.
It's a privileged communication, to use the language of the Uniform Mediation Act. And what it prohibits is anybody revealing what they call a communication, a mediation communication, during the process. So unless everybody would have to agree to it, and that's usually not going to happen.
The long and short of it, you're pretty safe to say what you need to say in mediation. It's not going to come back to haunt you. Well, Bruce, we certainly thank you for being our guest today on Law Talk and all that you do for our community as far as bringing people together. It just shows another side of the legal system whereby maybe we could get it done before we go to court. And
Well, we hope so.
And that's what you're all about. Well, thank you, Bruce.
Comments made by John's guest on Law Talk are solely those of his guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of Celebrezze Zangi Community Legal Education Project. To view this show and others, go to www.cdzclep.org. In the Wandsworth area, a complete listing of dates and times of this broadcast, tune in to WCTV Channel 15 or log on to wandsworthcity.com and follow the links to WCTV.